For nearly 150 years, this family photo at an old log cabin has remained a quiet relic of the past. But when experts zoomed in above the doorway, what they saw made them turn pale. Could a hidden detail finally reveal a secret the Swan family tried desperately to bury? Stay with us, because what they uncovered will change everything you thought you knew about this historic photograph. Photo that stopped the lab cold. What could a single photograph from 1878 reveal that would make trained historians freeze in disbelief? The discovery began in a quiet archive at the Washington Historical Society, where boxes of donated materials from the Swan family sat untouched for decades. Devin Matthews, a photographic conservator, had been cataloging the collection when one small, yellowed envelope caught his attention. Inside was a photograph of a log cabin, the timber weathered but still intact, surrounded by a family of 6. At first glance, it seemed like any other late 19th century pioneer scene, but something in the composition drew Devin closer. High-resolution scanning revealed details invisible to the naked eye. The children's expressions were unusually solemn, the adults positioned with deliberate symmetry, and most unsettling of all, the space above the cabin doorway contained a small object. It was faint, almost a shadow, yet its shape suggested it had been intentionally placed. Devin's heart raced as he adjusted the contrast. The form became clearer, a triangular symbol carved into the wood, partially obscured by the photograph's age and faint scratches. No record in the Swan family papers mentioned this marking, nor did local historical surveys note any similar carvings in neighboring cabins. Intrigued, Devin enlisted Professor Alana Mercer, an expert in 19th century American artifacts. Mercer immediately sensed the tension in the photograph. "It's not just a decorative element," she said, eyes narrowing at the screen. "Something about the placement suggests a warning or a marker." The team began tracing the cabin's history. Archival land records placed the Swan family in the isolated frontier area for just under a decade, but census data revealed inconsistencies. A woman listed in family records, Sarah Swan, seemed to vanish without explanation. Could this symbol above the doorway be connected to her disappearance? Mercer and Matthews turned to photogrammetry, analyzing the cabin's dimensions and the positioning of the figures. The triangular mark aligned almost perfectly with the center of the photograph, creating a focal point that drew the eye above the adult male's head. Devin noted the shadows cast by the object in late afternoon sunlight. They were inconsistent with the rest of the photograph, suggesting either a later addition or a hidden cavity behind the timber. Further magnification revealed faint letters etched beneath the triangle, nearly invisible to the naked eye. The letters spelled REM, though the meaning was unclear. Researchers combed through Swan family diaries and regional newspapers, but found no matching initials or references. The team widened their analysis. Devin enhanced the image using multispectral scanning, revealing a small scratch in the upper left corner, previously assumed to be damage. Instead, it appeared deliberate, a line extending from the triangular symbol to the roof's peak. Mercer hypothesized that the mark might serve as a directional guide or point to a hidden compartment. The combination of carvings, letters, and scratches suggested planning, intentionality, and secrecy. The photograph was no longer just a family portrait. It was a map of hidden truths. But the discovery of the anomaly triggered more questions than answers. Why had the Swan family left such a deliberate marker and yet never mentioned it in letters or diaries? Could the symbol represent a warning, a secret message, or a protection ritual tied to frontier folklore? Devin and Mercer debated theories late into the night. Every artifact they had examined previously fit neatly into historical patterns. Yet this photograph defied categorization. The log cabin, the figures, the subtle carvings above the doorway, all pointed to a narrative that someone had attempted to hide. The moment they realized the depth of what they had found, the room fell silent. The photograph was no longer a passive relic. It was an active clue, deliberately layered, encoded, and waiting to be interpreted. Its secrets were buried in plain sight for nearly 150 years. The team had only just begun to untangle what might have been a carefully orchestrated effort to preserve knowledge or conceal a truth long forgotten. Might a hidden symbol above a doorway unveil a story that history itself sought to erase? Stay with us to uncover the details. 2 photos, 2 realities. Devon stared at the second photograph, struggling to reconcile it with the first. At a glance, both pictures captured the same log cabin, the same weathered boards, the same sloping roof framed by towering pines. Yet the differences were undeniable, subtle but unnerving, as if the camera had betrayed a secret only visible to those willing to look closely. The most shocking discovery was immediately apparent. The woman who had been seated just outside the doorway in the first photograph had vanished. Not blurred, not obscured, not faded, completely gone. Where she had once rested, the ground now appeared empty, undisturbed, as if her presence had never existed. Devon's fingers traced the edges of the image on the screen, confirming the lines of shadow and light. Everything else remained perfectly aligned. The cabin boards, the rocking chair tipped slightly forward, even the small bundle of firewood. Only she had disappeared. Devon noticed more subtle anomalies above the doorway. What had initially looked like natural wear on the wooden lintel now seemed deliberate. Tiny scratches and markings, barely perceptible, aligned with geometric precision. They were not random cracks or peeling paint, but appeared carefully etched, as though someone had gone to the trouble of altering the frame for a purpose beyond decoration. Under magnification, the marks seemed to suggest a code or symbol, faintly reminiscent of European folk signage, an arcane language lost to time. To rule out coincidence, Devon and the team examined the metadata and contextual clues in both photographs. Placement, angle, and lighting indicated the images had been captured within minutes of each other. The sun's position, the length of the shadows, even the smoke from a small hearth curling through the open doorway, all confirmed a near-simultaneous shot. This ruled out natural disappearance or relocation. The woman's absence could not be explained by simple human movement. She had been intentionally removed or erased from the scene. Questions multiplied. Why remove her? Was it a protective measure designed to shield her identity from prying eyes? Could it be a symbolic act, an attempt to cleanse a memory, or mark an event too dark to record openly? Devon examined historical records of the Swan family, hoping to find clues. While some entries described tragedies, children lost to disease, sudden disappearances, unexplained deaths, none mentioned photographic manipulation. Yet the precision suggested intent rather than accident. The team also explored early photographic techniques. In the 1870s, retouching and manipulation were possible but cumbersome, often requiring meticulous handwork on negatives. The erasure CMY seen in this second photo went beyond typical methods. The shadows matched perfectly, lighting inconsistencies were minimal, and the surrounding objects were undisturbed. Whoever orchestrated this had both technical skill and a motive strong enough to erase a person from the frame without leaving obvious traces. Devon's mind returned again to the markings above the door. If these scratches were a clue or warning, then the removal of the woman might represent part of a larger, carefully constructed message. Perhaps the cabin itself was a vessel of secrets, encoding warnings, protections, or even dark legacies through subtle visual cues. Every new observation seemed to point toward a deliberate act, executed with purpose and precision, hinting at truths the family sought to shield from the world. Could the woman's disappearance be more than a trick of the camera? Was it a sign of secrets the Swan family had fought to keep hidden for generations? Every detail suggested this was no ordinary photograph. Devon realized that understanding why she vanished could unravel a story long buried in shadow. Can one fleeting photograph reveal the Swan family's most guarded secret? Come along as we uncover the hidden story. The rabbit that wasn't just a rabbit. Could a small, seemingly innocent creature hold a centuries-old warning? Devon squinted at the photograph, his eyes locking onto the carved image above the cabin's doorway. It was unmistakably a rabbit, but it was inverted, its head pointing downward, legs splayed unnaturally. The symbol seemed almost playful at first glance, yet something in its deliberate placement hinted at a deeper purpose. Why would the Swan family, meticulous in every other detail, choose to depict a rabbit upside down? Devon and Alana began tracing local pioneer-era folklore, consulting diaries, town records, and oral histories passed down through generations. What emerged was a pattern that chilled them. In several accounts, the upside-down rabbit was not a whimsical decoration, but a signal, a subtle warning of danger or a protective charm meant to safeguard those inside a home. Some records described it as a guardian of thresholds, meant to confuse or deter malevolent spirits or outsiders who might seek to uncover family secrets. In rural settlements, where superstition intertwined with everyday survival, symbols like these were often the only means of discreet communication. The researchers found references to the rabbit appearing in various contexts. In one 1872 diary entry, a woman wrote about placing a small carved rabbit over her doorway to hide the path of the living from those who follow the dead. In another account, a traveling preacher described a home where the symbol of an inverted rabbit warned visitors of a hidden illness within. The repetition of this motif suggested that the Swan family may have adopted a similar practice, using the rabbit as a visual language to encode messages only they could interpret. Attention returned to the cabin itself. The beam above the doorway, where the rabbit had been carved, bore scratches and faint etchings that aligned with the markings Devon had noticed in the earlier photographs. These additional symbols hinted that the rabbit was not merely decorative, but part of a larger coded message. The precision of the carvings suggested knowledge of both symbolism and spatial awareness, possibly indicating the presence of hidden compartments, warnings, or directions known only to the family. Historical context deepened the intrigue. Devon cross-referenced the cabin's inhabitants, Ruth, the little girl, and Sarah, the woman removed from the photograph. Both had been central to unexplained disappearances in local records. Could the rabbit symbolize a protective charm specifically for one of them? Or perhaps it marked a dangerous secret, hidden so that any observer would only see an innocent motif without recognizing its true meaning. The interplay of folklore, family legacy, and physical artifacts began to form a complex picture. Every detail of the cabin, every mark above the doorway, seemed to work in concert to conceal a reality that was deliberately obscured from outsiders. Alana suggested another possibility. The upside-down rabbit might serve as a psychological warning to those who stumbled upon it, an instinctive signal that all was not as it seemed. By inverting a familiar image, the family could trigger unease or caution, deterring prying eyes from probing further. The combination of superstition and strategy painted the Swan family as guardians of secrets, using folklore as both shield and guide. For Devon, the realization was unsettling. The cabin was not just a structure, it was a narrative, a layered story of warnings, protections, and erased presences. The inverted rabbit emerged as a focal point, a symbol bridging myth and reality, suggesting that the family's intentions went far beyond ordinary survival. The rabbit's seemingly simple form carried the weight of hidden knowledge, hinting that Ruth, Sarah, and perhaps others were tied to secrets the world was not meant to see. Does a single carved rabbit hold the key to unraveling centuries of hidden truths within the Swan family? Stay with us to uncover what comes next. Hidden in plain sight. Someone had manipulated reality so completely that a person could vanish without a trace, leaving only whispers in the wood and shadows in a photograph. Devon's hands hovered over the digital enhancements of the Swan cabin images, the glow of the monitor revealing faint inconsistencies in the wood grain above the doorway. At first, it looked like ordinary wear, but as the software intensified contrast and mapped micro-abrasions, a subtle smear emerged, almost imperceptible, where Sarah had once sat. The shape of her presence lingered, a ghostly imprint that suggested deliberate removal rather than natural fading. The discovery prompted the team to dig deeper into the family's records. In a dusty box beneath the floorboards, Tucked alongside rusted tools and yellowed papers, they found a carpenter's ledger. The book was remarkable. Meticulous notes, precise measurements, and sketches detailing hidden compartments, false panels, and instructions signed with the initials L. Swan. Devon traced his finger along the page where a small cavity was mapped directly above the cabin's doorway, matching the beam where the upside-down rabbit had been carved. Every line suggested forethought, an intention to conceal rather than simply decorate. Even the beam itself demanded scrutiny. When Devon and Alana pried carefully at the edges, they discovered a narrow sealed cavity that aligned perfectly with the rabbit motif. The compartment was designed not to hold ordinary items, but something meant to remain invisible, safeguarded from casual observers or even nosy neighbors. The craftsmanship was precise, the kind only a skilled artisan with a vested interest in secrecy could achieve. It seemed increasingly clear that the Swan family had created a physical system of protection, hiding objects, or people, in plain sight, encoded within both architecture and folklore. Archival research widened the lens. Devon combed through local court records, parish registers, and newspapers, finding an unsettling pattern. There were multiple mentions of unregistered adoptions, illegitimate children quietly placed in distant households, and whispers of financial or moral scandals the family had kept hidden. Each fragment of information deepened the puzzle. The Swan family had resources, knowledge, and intent to obscure parts of their history. The evidence suggested that Ruth, the young girl, may not have been missing by accident. Instead, she could have been deliberately shielded from public view, a protective measure entwined with family pride, shame, or danger. The interplay between the physical evidence in the cabin and the archival records created a web of deliberate concealment. The smear on the floor, the rabbit above the doorway, the sealed cavity, all hinted at a plan executed with precision. It was no longer a question of mere coincidence. Someone had thought through every detail. Every act of erasure left subtle clues, a breadcrumb trail for those who knew how to look. Yet the plan was sophisticated enough to mislead casual observers, making the absence appear natural while embedding signs for insiders. Devon's thoughts kept circling back to Sarah and Ruth. If one smear could reveal intentional removal, what other truths might be hidden in the wood, in forgotten ledgers, or in the unexamined corners of the property? The possibility that Ruth had been purposefully concealed suggested motives that reached far beyond ordinary family matters. Was she hidden for her safety, to cover a scandal, or to prevent her knowledge from exposing something far darker? The cabin, once a quiet relic of pioneer life, had transformed into a living document of secrets, a coded message from one generation to the next. Every detail raised the stakes. The combination of physical evidence, historical records, and cryptic family planning pointed to deliberate design. The Swan family's methods were precise, the purpose obscured but deliberate, leaving questions that demanded answers. What had been hidden in plain sight, and what would remain invisible unless someone uncovered the truth? Could the vanishing of a single person reveal an entire hidden history? Let us tell you. The beam speaks. Dust particles danced in the sunlight as Devon and Alana pried open the central beam above the cabin doorway. The wood had darkened with age, its surface etched with tiny cracks and the faint fingerprints of hands long gone. For nearly 150 years, the beam had stood silently, a witness to the life, the joys, and the secrets of the Swan family. As they lifted a loose plank, a small tin box tumbled into view, its edges rusted but intact, as if waiting patiently for someone to uncover it. Inside, the box contained items that seemed ordinary at first glance. A folded strip of yellowed papers, a thin piece of cloth, and a metal photograph plate. Each artifact radiated an aura of intent. The papers were brittle, ink faded, yet careful examination revealed neat handwriting detailing names, dates, and brief notations. Cryptic lines that hinted at events never recorded elsewhere. The cloth, now brown with age, appeared to be part of a small garment, carefully preserved. It carried a faint scent of cedar and smoke, as if it had absorbed the essence of the cabin itself over decades. The metal photograph plate demanded closer attention. As Devon carefully cleaned it, the image revealed Ruth alone in the cabin, her small hands gripping the beam for support. Around her, children's shoes were nailed above the wood, each pair telling a story of footsteps taken, of lives that had once echoed in the rooms above. The photograph was dated 1887, and the scene suggested something deliberate. Ruth was not simply standing there. Her pose, the placement of the shoes, and even the shadows in the image all indicated that someone had intended to leave a message, a record for the future. The beam had functioned as more than structural support. Devon realized it had served as a time capsule, a vessel to hold evidence of survival, secrecy, and perhaps even warning. Every element in the tin box, from the photograph to the cloth, reinforced the idea that the cabin was more than a home. It was a carefully curated archive, hiding fragments of a story that someone had tried to control. The shoes above the beam were not decorations. They were markers, symbolic guardians meant to preserve memory in a tangible form. Further inspection of the photograph and the accompanying papers revealed subtle connections to earlier discoveries. Names on the papers corresponded with individuals mentioned in local folklore, but the tone suggested caution. Someone had feared the truth might be discovered too soon, or that it could endanger those still alive. The beam had become a vessel of intentional preservation, carrying secrets that were invisible to anyone who did not know where, how, or why to look. It spoke through the objects it held, silently asserting that no erasure could ever be complete. The meticulous effort put into concealing the tin box within a central beam indicated planning across generations. The family had rewritten narratives, hidden individuals, and obscured the cabin's history from outsiders, yet they had also left breadcrumbs. Each artifact functioned as a message, an encoded story meant for discovery at the right moment. In the hands of Devon and Alana, these items transformed from mere objects into a chronicle, bridging the gap between what was lost and what could now be understood. As they studied the photograph of Ruth, gripping the beam surrounded by the tiny shoes, a chilling thought took hold. The Swan family had attempted to rewrite history, to hide people, events, and truths from the world. Yet, despite every effort to erase, the beam itself had preserved a record. The small tin box had survived decades of dust, decay, and neglect, holding the very essence of the family's intent and secrecy. If a beam could hold centuries of secrets, what else remained concealed within the cabin, waiting for discovery? Come along as we uncover the hidden story. Ruth remembered. And the air in the lab was thick with the quiet hum of scanners and the faint smell of aged paper. Devon carefully laid out the 1901 photograph, the edges frayed and curling, yet the image itself was remarkably clear. A young Ruth sat on a bench at the Port Townsend rest home for mariners, her gaze steady and composed, a trace of the resilience captured in the beam photograph years earlier. The connection between the cabin and this distant home had remained obscured for decades, yet the photograph finally tied together the fragmented threads of a life that had once been nearly erased from memory. Ruth's survival had not been simple. Historical records hinted at her placement in the rest home, a facility meant for elderly or infirm mariners and their dependents. The staff's logs, overlooked for generations, contained a brief reference to a young girl under the care of a Mrs. Swan, a notation that matched letters and scraps found inside the beam. It became clear that Ruth had been carefully hidden, moved under layers of secrecy to protect her from outsiders, and perhaps even from history itself. Every small decision, from her placement to the messages left in the cabin, spoke of deliberate foresight. The family had preserved her story in coded objects, ready for discovery by someone perceptive enough to notice. As the team compared the Port Townsend photograph to earlier images and artifacts, a startling continuity emerged. The same folded papers from the tin box, the shoes nailed above the beam, and Ruth's presence in the 1901 photo formed a chain of evidence that spanned decades. It was as though Ruth had left herself breadcrumbs across time, ensuring that if anyone traced the markers in the cabin, they could reconstruct her survival. The beam had acted as a silent witness, holding a record of endurance and memory that no erasure could fully erase. The lab carefully assembled a display, lining up photographs, documents, and fragments of cloth in chronological order. Each piece told part of the story, yet together they revealed a more complete narrative. The girl who had been deliberately hidden, the woman who had grown in secrecy, and the family who had orchestrated both protection and concealment. Observers could see how history is not just what is captured in plain sight, but also what is deliberately hidden, only to resurface when the right eyes find it. Ruth's survival completed the hidden narrative. She had endured, leaving physical traces, written records, and subtle signals that defied the passage of time. The combination of artifacts and photographs demonstrated a life carefully preserved, a story that would otherwise have vanished completely. Each item in the display spoke of resilience, foresight, and the quiet persistence of memory against deliberate erasure. What do you think is the truth behind the 1878 family photo? The missing figure, the mysterious markings above the door, or the hidden messages left in the cabin? Share your thoughts in the comments.